Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan. Um, Today we're diving deep into some pretty fascinating stuff. We're looking at Sahih Bukhari,
Yeah.
specifically Book 51,
Yeah.
all about wills and testaments, like a blend of practical advice and spiritual guidance, all in one.
Yeah, it's really about approaching these big transitions in life
Yeah,
with a sense of, wisdom and balance, making sure both our worldly and spiritual needs are addressed.
yeah. And right off the bat, the very first hadith just sets the tone. It's like, okay, everyone, listen up. The Prophet Muhammad really strongly recommended that every Muslim who owns something, anything, no matter how small, should write a will and keep it accessible.
It's Hadith number 1. And it really makes you think about the times back then. Writing wills might not have been as common as it is now. So for the Prophet to emphasize it really shows how important he thought it was, kind of laying the groundwork for a responsible and conscientious approach to our worldly possessions.
Right. It's about being prepared.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense, right? Having a will prevents arguments among family after someone passes away. Make sure your wishes are carried out. And that brings peace of mind to everyone.
Exactly. Safeguarding individual wishes and the well-being of the family. You can just imagine how much heartache and conflict could be avoided by having a clear document that outlines, how things should be handled.
Absolutely. And then we get to Hadith number 2. This one paints such a human picture of the Prophet Muhammad. It lists his possessions at the time of his death. And it's not what you might expect.
Yeah, you might think it'd be riches and treasures, right? But it's actually a white mule, his weapons, and a piece of land that he'd already given to charity. Pretty simple, especially for someone who had such a huge impact on the world.
It really challenges our assumptions. Like, we often think of prophets as these figures of immense wealth, but this hadith shows us that Prophet Muhammad's focus was on something much bigger.
Yeah, it really highlights his detachment from worldly desires and his commitment to a higher purpose. This ties in with something we'll discuss later. In Hadith number 5, where the Prophet encourages leaving inheritors wealthy rather than burdened with poverty. It's all about balance, balancing worldly affairs and spiritual aspirations.
Beautiful. Now, Hadith number 3 is incredibly powerful. It says that the Prophet Muhammad's true will and testament was essentially the Quran itself.
It's narrated by Abdullah ibn Abu Wafa. He explains that the Prophet left the Quran to the Muslim community, highlighting its importance as guidance, not just in this life, but also in preparing for the hereafter. It's like a light for all Muslims.
The universal inheritance, a spiritual compass, for everyone to use to navigate life and to get closer to God.
Yeah.
Powerful symbolism, right?
It is. It puts the Quran right at the center of Islam, offering solace, direction, wisdom for everyone, no matter their wealth or status.
This is fascinating. But there's more. Hadiths 5 and 6 talk about limitations on what can be given in a will. The recommended limit is 1/3 of someone's total wealth. Why would there be a limit?
Good question. It comes down to balance. Islam recognizes, honoring someone's last wishes, but it also wants to protect the rights of the heirs, those closest to the deceased who depend on them. So this limit ensures that someone's charitable desires don't overshadow their family's well-being.
I see. So it's not about discouraging charity. It's about making sure things are fair, balancing those charitable intentions with the needs of the family.
Right. The focus is on making sure the inheritors are financially secure, while still allowing for thoughtful charitable giving within reasonable boundaries. Hadith 7 actually mentions how this limit of 1/3 became common practice among Muslims.
So it wasn't just theoretical. It shaped how people lived. Now, let's talk about charity itself. Hadith 11 makes a distinction between giving charity while you're alive and healthy versus giving it on your deathbed. What's the message there, do you think?
It reminds us to be proactive, to give out of a genuine desire to help, not out of fear or regret when facing our own mortality. It encourages sincerity in giving, making it a part of our lives, not just something we do at the last minute.
It makes you wonder, right? Are we more generous when facing our own mortality?
It's an interesting question. Maybe facing our vulnerability makes us more compassionate, makes us want to make a difference while we can.
Wow. And then there's this story in Hadiths 19, 23, and 24. It's about Sa'd bin Ubadah, the companion of the Prophet. He gave his whole garden to charity in the name of his deceased mother.
It's beautiful, real filial piety. He wasn't content just inheriting her property. He wanted to benefit her soul in the afterlife with this act of generosity.
It's so touching. It reminds us we can honor our parents and seek blessings for them even after they're gone. It speaks to this connection between this life and the next.
It does, and it shows a key Islamic principle. The rewards of good deeds can reach beyond our lives and benefit those who have passed. It's a strong motivation to keep giving, knowing that our actions can have a lasting impact on those we love.
This is all so insightful.
Yeah.
Let's pause here for now. We'll continue exploring these teachings soon.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? The lasting impact of our actions.
It does. Makes me think about charity more broadly. Like, what else can we learn from these hadiths about how early Muslims approached giving?
Well, there's the concept of caring for orphans, really central to Islamic teachings. Hadiths 25 and 27 are particularly relevant here. They stress the importance of treating orphans justly and fairly, especially when it comes to their inheritance.
Makes sense. They're so vulnerable. We need to make sure they're protected and their rights are respected. Can you clarify some of the specific rules? Like, how were these safeguards actually put into practice?
Absolutely. Hadith 25 addresses marriage for orphan girls, specifically those under the care of a guardian. It says that a guardian cannot marry an orphan girl unless they provide a fair dowry, protecting her financially, preventing any abuse of power.
So it's not just about preventing harm. It's about treating them with respect and dignity, prioritizing their needs and securing their future.
Exactly. Justice, fairness, upholding the rights of the vulnerable. Hadith 27 goes on to say that a guardian can't use an orphan's wealth for themselves, unless it's a small, necessary expense for the orphan's care. And even then, only if the guardian themselves is poor.
Like a system of checks and balances. To protect the orphan's inheritance from being misused shows how seriously they took this responsibility.
It does. These hadiths also remind us that caring for orphans isn't just financial, it's emotional and social too. They should be treated with kindness, compassion, and love, ensuring their overall well-being.
Now let's move on to something else. We touched upon it briefly before. Islamic endowments, or waqf. Hadiths 26, 30, 33, and 34. Talk about this. It seems like such a unique and enduring form of giving.
It is. A waqf is like a charitable donation of property. But there's a catch. The property itself is preserved forever, and its yield, whether it's profit, rent, or produce, goes to charity, like a trust fund that benefits a cause for generations.
Wow. A gift that keeps on giving. Do you have any examples of how these waqf were used during the Prophet's time?
Of course. Hadith 26 tells the story of Umar ibn al-Khattab, a close companion of the Prophet. He dedicated a garden of date palms as a waqf. The proceeds went to all sorts of good causes, freeing slaves, helping the poor, supporting travelers, and those engaged in jihad, striving for a righteous cause.
Incredible. They really integrated charity into the very fabric of their society.
Absolutely. They were deeply committed to social responsibility. They really believed in the power of generosity to transform lives. Hadith 30 gives us another touching example. It's about Abu Talha, another companion of the Prophet. He was known for his wealth in date palm gardens.
I remember we talked about this one earlier. Abu Talha giving away his cherished garden, Bayruha.
That's the one. This garden was really special to him. It was near the Prophet's mosque in Medina, and the Prophet himself would visit it and enjoy its fresh water. But when Abu Talha heard a verse from the Quran encouraging Muslims to give what they love most for Allah, he was deeply moved.
He realized that true love means sacrifice, and that giving what's most precious to us is a true expression of devotion to God.
Exactly. He went to the Prophet and offered his garden as charity, hoping to earn God's reward. And you know what's interesting? The Prophet advised him to distribute the garden among his relatives, making sure his family benefited first.
So charity begins at home. Taking care of our families is a fundamental form of charity.
You got it. It's about recognizing the needs of those closest to us and helping them. Sometimes the most powerful acts of generosity happen within our own families and communities, not just on a grand scale.
This whole concept of waqf is amazing. They were thinking long-term, trying to create a lasting legacy of giving that goes beyond their own lifetimes.
I agree. It shows their wisdom. They understood that true wealth isn't about accumulating possessions. It's about using them to benefit others, to contribute to the greater good. Now, let's look closer at how a waqf is established. Hadith 33 tells the story of how Umar ibn al-Khattab, who we mentioned before, set up a waqf after acquiring land in Khaybar.
So it wasn't just about money or possessions. They dedicated valuable assets like land.
Right. Umar wanted to use this land for a good cause, so he went to the Prophet for advice. The Prophet told him to establish a waqf with specific conditions to ensure it was managed properly and the right people would benefit.
What kind of conditions?
Well, the Prophet said the land couldn't be sold or given away or inherited. It had to stay as waqf property. And the profits had to be used to support the poor, travelers, freeing slaves, and even helping those engaged in jihad.
Wow. So they use WAC to address so many different social needs in a really organized and sustainable way.
It shows how comprehensive Islamic teachings are. They're not just about individual spiritual growth, they're about the well-being of the entire community. And there's another interesting detail in Hadith 33. It says the person managing the walk could eat from it reasonably and fairly and share with a friend, but without any intention of personal gain.
That's an important point. Transparency and accountability. The person managing the WAF shouldn't be profiting from it. They're there to make sure the resources are used ethically and effectively for their intended purpose.
Exactly. Even when doing good, our intentions matter. Sincerity and integrity are key when dealing with something as important as a charitable endowment.
These hadiths give us so much to think about. The different ways early Muslims approached charitable giving and how they benefited both individuals and society as a whole. It's inspiring.
It is. Lots to reflect on.
It's amazing, right? How they set up these systems for long-term giving, making sure their generosity would keep making a difference for generations.
It really shows their vision and their dedication to creating a just and compassionate society. But, there's another aspect of giving we haven't touched on yet. The relationship between the living and the deceased.
Oh, you mean giving charity on behalf of those who have passed away, like we saw with Sa'd bin Ubadah in his garden? He dedicated it to his mother.
Yes. But there are other hadiths that shed light on this practice. Hadith 22, for instance. A man goes to the Prophet. His mother had just passed away quite suddenly. And he tells the Prophet, if my mother had had more time, she would give him more to charity.
Oh, that's such a heartfelt sentiment. It speaks volumes about his love and respect for his mother.
Right. He wants to honor her, even after she's gone. So he asks the Prophet this really profound question. Would it benefit his mother if he gave charity on her behalf?
It's a question many of us might ask. Can we do good deeds in their name? And will those deeds somehow reach them, benefit them in the afterlife?
It's a very human desire to care for our loved ones even after they're gone. And the Prophet's answer gives us comfort. He says, yes, giving charity on behalf of the deceased does benefit them.
That's reassuring to know that even after someone passes, we can still do things that contribute to their spiritual well-being.
Exactly. It highlights this belief that the rewards of charity can extend beyond our earthly lives. They reach our loved ones and bring them blessings. It encourages us to remember them through kindness and generosity.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious about another aspect of inheritance. Fulfilling any vows or promises made by the deceased.
Ah, yes. An important aspect of honoring their legacy. Often overlooked. Hadith 23 provides a good example. Sa'd bin Ubadah, whose generosity we've already seen, he goes to the Prophet with a concern. His mother had made a vow, but she passed away before fulfilling it.
Makes sense. Vows are serious matters. He would want to make sure her vow was fulfilled, even though she couldn't do it herself.
Exactly. So he asks the Prophet if he can fulfill the vow on his mother's behalf. And the Prophet says yes. This shows us how important it is to honor commitments, even after someone's death. Deep respect for their wishes.
It reminds us that our responsibilities don't always end with death. Sometimes we need to make sure the unfinished business, so to speak, is taken care of.
Yes, it's a sense of continuity. Connection between this life and the next. Our actions here can have a ripple effect, impacting not only our own journey, but the well-being of those who have passed on.
Going through these hadiths, I'm really struck by how they cover so much. They provide guidance for so many different situations, like a framework for understanding life, death, inheritance, charity. It's quite comprehensive.
I agree. And that's what makes them so valuable. Practical advice, moral lessons, spiritual insights, all woven together to help us live more meaningful lives.
They teach us how to make ethical choices, cultivate compassion, and contribute to a just society.
Exactly. And even though the specific context might be different from our lives today, the underlying principles are timeless. They apply to everyone.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to Hadith 37, the one about the Prophet's heirs not inheriting any money because his remaining possessions went to charity. It's such a strong message.
It is. It says a lot about the Prophet's character and his dedication to serving others.
His detachment from material wealth, his commitment to helping those in need, it really challenges our usual ideas of legacy and success. True wealth isn't about what we keep. It's about what we give away.
That's a message that resonates with everyone, I think. No matter your background or beliefs, it reminds us that our time is limited, and the greatest legacy we can leave is one of generosity, compassion, and making the world a better place.
A legacy that inspires us to live purposefully, to use our resources wisely, to make a positive difference in the lives of others.
Well said. I think it's time to conclude our discussion.
Yes, but let's leave our listeners with something to think about. How can we, inspired by these teachings, incorporate the principles of responsible inheritance and charitable giving into our own lives?
It's a good question to ponder, a challenge to embrace, an opportunity to grow, and a chance to create a lasting legacy of love and compassion in the world.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. May these teachings continue to inspire us all.